You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Welcome to Women's Media Center Live. I'm Robin Morgan, and it is All Hallows Eve. That, of course, is a harvest festival, and before its adoption or co-optation as being somewhat demonic by the Catholic Church and then Christianity in general, it was an older matriarchal faith system, the end of the year cycle, and a secular but gentle opening, seamless between the worlds of the living and the dead. It was a celebration. Today, Halloween is actually the most celebrated holiday in the United States. Now, that's possibly because it's basically secular. And given trick-or-treating by kids and dressing up, and, well, it's sort of our version of Mardi Gras. And it's fun. So today on this program, we're going to examine the slow and increasing death of formal religious affiliation in this country and the birth of what you might conceivably call secular grace. So there's lots to get to, and let's get started by going inside the headlines. The Christian share of the U.S. population is declining, while the number of U.S. adults who don't identify with any organized religion whatsoever is growing. That's according to an extensive new survey conducted by the Pew Research Center. You can find it online in granular detail. Moreover, these historically unprecedented changes are taking place across the religious landscape, across it, affecting all regions of the country and different demographic groups. The drop in Christian affiliation is particularly pronounced among young adults, but it's occurring among Americans of all ages. The same trend is seen among whites, blacks, the Latinx community, college graduates, and adults with only a high school education, and among women as well as among men. Yes, I know, the U.S. is still home to more Christians than any other country in the world, including Italy, where Rome and the Pope lie. And a large majority of Americans, approximately 7 in 10, do continue to identify with some branch of the Christian faith, although many of them, if not most, tend to fib on questionnaires. But a major new survey by Pew finds that the percentage of adults ages 18 and older who describe themselves as Christians has dropped by nearly 8 percentage points in just 7 years. And during the same period, from 2007 to 2014, the percentage of Americans who are religiously unaffiliated, describing themselves openly as atheist, agnostic, or nothing in particular, has jumped more than 6 points, from 16.1% up to 22.8%. Also, the share of Americans who identify with non-Christian faiths has inched up from 4.7% in 2007 to 5.9% in 2014. The evangelical Protestant share of the U.S. population also has dipped. Now, there are a number of reasons for this. For one, the U.S. population as a whole has become much more racially and ethnically diverse, which is always a good thing. And it means that non-Hispanic whites now account for smaller shares of evangelicals, mainline Protestants, and Catholics than 7 years earlier. Religious intermarriage also is on the rise and linked with the growth of the unaffiliated population. Though many U.S. religious groups are aging, the unaffiliated are comparatively young and getting younger on average over time. In all, Christians have lost the most ground, not only in their relative share of the U.S. population, but also in absolute numbers. The continuing rash of appalling sexual misconduct by evangelical preachers is a major element, because evangelical women are beginning to have had it. Looking at just some of the headlines splayed across my desk, Southern Baptist leader Ronnie Floyd resigns from internal fight over sex abuse investigation. He was the acting CEO of the business end and has just resigned as head of the Southern Baptist Convention's executive committee. The SBC has been rocked by reports of hundreds and hundreds of sexual abuse cases revealed in a 2019 investigation by the Houston Chronicle newspaper. Nevertheless, several sexual abuse survivors have claimed that the denomination has not done anything nearly enough to investigate and prevent sexual abuse because it refuses to track abusers within its network of churches. In other words, they just move them around. There's a headline here on Ravi Zacharias, who died last year after having tried to weather an avalanche of reports on his, quote, sexting, unwanted touching, spiritual abuse, and rape, close quote. He was one of the most revered evangelists in the country and had founded a global organization. Literally hundreds of women came forward with their allegations, and still more were discovered during the investigation. The president of the Arkansas Baptist State Convention was defeated by Mike Huckabee, you remember him, for the post of state governor. But he served on former President Donald Trump's advisory council ahead of the 2016 election, and he succeeded, furthermore, Southern Baptist pastor Frank Page, who resigned in 2018 over a, quote, mostly morally questionable relationship. What is wrong with you guys? Well, that's the question evangelical women like Beth Allison Barr are asking. She's been using historical analysis to challenge contemporary claims of gender roles, particularly so-called complementarianism, the concept that though men and women have equal value in God's eyes, the Bible describes them in different roles at home and in the church. Ergo, you get the notions of biblical manhood and biblical womanhood. Barr is in her 50s, a conservative evangelical Christian, but she is also the author of, quote, The Making of Biblical Womanhood, How the Subjugation of Women Became Gospel Truth. That's a book. She holds seminars. She's a bestseller. She's very popular. She's in very bad odor, however, with more conservative members of her and other churches. Still, she does push the envelope and seems to think that reform is possible, without quite grasping that to relax iron control from a militant patriarchal fist is to begin to let the whole thing slide. Then there is Mormon Women for Ethical Government, a group that started from several women friends, and within a few weeks had over 4,000 members from across the political spectrum. There were, says founder Charlie Mullins Glenn, an author and teacher and the founder of the group, quote, thousands of other women of faith like myself who felt compelled to act, to push back against fear and hate, and take a stand for love. The motto, we will not be complicit by being complacent. So, we have scandals emanating from the guys, and they are legion. We have women as a cultural and social as well as religious force rising up and saying no more. Various critics of the religious drop have also blamed television, commuting, suburban sprawl, the two-career family, and the generational shift. Some point to changes in sexual morality to explain the drop. Others accuse the Supreme Court, for its, get this, liberalizing religious policies. For example, if the court had not prohibited states from subsidizing religious schools, private religious schools would be even more numerous than they are today, and religious communities might be stronger. Or, if the court had not eliminated public school prayer, as forbidden by the Constitution, students might have become more devout. Or that the court's focus on rights has exacerbated the individualism of American society that contributed to the inner secularization of American religion. Most others, I think more sensibly, attribute the shift to social policy changes in American religious culture and to trends. like the dramatic increase in the proportion of Americans receiving college educations. Remember that religion and education were once highly entwined in the United States, and they are now two distinct societal systems. I would add that other shifts have been brought about by wars, by the women's movement, by the civil rights movement, and, of course, by demographic shifts. The drift away from religion has been compounded by strong backlash against the religious right and the Republican Evangelical Alliance, as well as by the Catholic Church's sexual abuse scandals, and by conservative religion's anti-gay agenda. In the early 1970s, only 1 in 20 Americans claimed none as their religion. Today, it is closer to 1 in 3. And this is due to organic, natural decline in belief systems and in church membership. We are not talking about dictatorships here, those that forcibly destroy religion, because that always produces a backlash. Rather, secular societies who do qualify for this category of, we could call it voluntary drift from religion, possibly outgrowing it. Countries like Japan, the Scandinavian nations, the United Kingdom, Australia, etc., uphold and respect religious freedom, yet also tend to be better educated, more prosperous, and live more securely. Women hold paying jobs, and more people wait to get married and have kids, all of which, especially in combination, tend to decrease religiosity. These tend to be among the healthiest, wealthiest, and safest places in the world. But some people do worry that religious organizations do so much good, engaging in charitable work, food drives, setting up soup kitchens and homeless shelters. Well, that's true, but that is based on locality and access, more than on content. In other words, if people in a neighborhood know one another, if people can recreate at a local level with a degree of cultural homogeneity needed to sustain a church form of religion, if faces are put on human realities, there's much greater likelihood that others will come to their aid in times of crisis, which, by the way, in this globalizing world of ours, makes it crucial to keep local newspapers and media free and responsible to the truth. Besides, the local bonding stems from an altruistic response, not a structural cure for root causes, which is why secular democracies do a better job of ameliorating homelessness and poverty by employing secular solutions and wise economic strategies, as well as setting up more responsive institutions. You know, affordable housing and subsidized health care are infinitely preferable and do an infinitely better job to alleviate the suffering of the poor and the sick than faith-based charities, which usually also ask for, if not requiring, obedience to their own internal rules. Secular societies are correlated with moral orientations that would improve our nation as it has others. For instance, secular people, when compared to their religious peers, are much more likely to understand and respect the scientific method to, say, get vaccinated, to endorse and support sex education for youth, and to support women's reproductive rights, universal health care, environmental protections, death with dignity, gun safety legislation, and treating drug abuse as a medical rather than criminal problem. In all of this, we must keep in mind that among advanced Western industrial societies, only in the United States has there appeared a religious fundamentalist movement of societal importance. We can't forget the importance of that, while we wring our hands about the dissension in the nation today. That's central. But that unfortunate truth has come smack up against what the United States, at its deepest core, represents: the paradigmatic and historically first ever in the history of humans model of the separation of church and state. It will be difficult work, but the choice is ours. We have to take our first break here, but we will be back in just a moment, so don't go away because there's lots more coming up. And that includes, what else on Halloween? The Surrealism Corner. Subscribe to this program on your favorite podcast platform and leave us a review. Follow us on Twitter at WMC Live, like our Facebook page at facebook.com/WMC Live, and visit us at WMCLive.com for more information about our show and our guests.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
Looking backward and looking forward can be the same thing. It all depends on your perspective as you enter the Surrealism Corner. I have been asked recently, many times, what about Witch? In the 70s, it was a women's group. It was very popular. When can I join? When did it disband? Well, it never disbanded because it never was formally joined. So this is a bit of a story about Witch. Witch was born on Halloween in 1968 in New York, and in a few weeks, covens had sprung up in such diverse spots as Boston, Chicago, San Francisco, North Carolina, Portland, Oregon, Austin, Texas, and Tokyo, Japan. And they are, in fact, still spreading. As you'll soon see when you hear some excerpts from the Witch Womanifesto, we played with words a lot, there is no specific joining of Witch, so there doesn't have to be a specific leaving. And the name, the anagram that the name stood for, which originally was Women's International Terrorist Conspiracy from Hell. You couldn't get away with that these days. But Chicago Witch covens showered the sociology department at the university there with nail clippings and hair cuttings and disrupted local bridal fairs. The fluidity and the wit of witches locally was the ever-changing acronym. On Mother's Day one year, one coven became Women Infuriated at Taking Care of Hoodlums. Another group, working at a major Eastern insurance corporation, became Women Indentured to Travelers' Corporate Hell. Still another set of infiltrators, working at Bell Telephone, manifested themselves disruptively as Women Incensed at Telephone Company Harassment. And a Midwest coven appeared as Women's Independent Taxpayers, Consumers, and Homemakers, Women Interested in Toppling Consumption Holidays, and the latest heard, as of that writing, in Sisterhood is Powerful, was Women Inspired to Commit Herstory. Now, I based the Womanifesto on the quote from the Malleus Maleficarum, which was an actual book, The Witch's Hammer, authored by two Dominican friars, inquisitors both, Kramer and Sprenger. And the quote was simply, "For rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft. All rebellion is as the sin of witchcraft," meaning to rebel against anything is to head for the stake. That's from 1 Samuel 15:23. So this is what I wrote out of that quote. Witch is an all-women everything. It's theater, revolution, magic, joy, garlic flowers, spells. It's an awareness that witches and gypsies were the original guerrillas and resistance fighters against oppression, particularly that of women, down through the ages. Witches have always been women who dared to be courageous, aggressive, intelligent, nonconformist, explorative, curious, independent, revolutionary. This possibly explains why as many as 9 million of them have been estimated as having been murdered over 3 inquisitions during the Middle Ages. Witches were the first birth control practitioners and abortionists, the first alchemists. You turn dross into gold and you devalue the whole idea of money. Witch lives and laughs in every woman. She is the free part of each of us. Beneath the shy smiles, the acquiescence to absurd male domination, the makeup or flesh-suffocating clothing our sick society demands, there is no joining witch. If you are a woman and dare to look within yourself, you are a witch. You make your own rules. You are free and beautiful. You can be invisible or evident in how you choose to make your witch self known. You can form your own coven of sister witches. 13 is a cozy number for a group. And do your own actions. Whatever is repressive, solely male-oriented, greedy, exclusionary, puritanical, authoritarian, those are your targets. And your own boundless imagination is your ammunition. Your power comes from yourself as a woman and is activated by working in concert with your sisters. The power of the coven is more than the sum of its individual members because it is together. You are pledged to free our brothers from oppression and stereotyped sexual roles, whether they like it or not, as well as ourselves. You are a witch by saying aloud, "I am a witch," 3 times, and thinking about that. You are a witch by being female, untamed, angry, joyous, and it's the immortal part of yourself. Which means it couldn't possibly be more surreal. We need to take another break here, but we will return directly with some fighting words about, of all people, Britney Spears. We'll be right back. The Women's Media Center, founded in 2005 by Jane Fonda, Gloria Steinem, and myself, is a progressive, nonpartisan, nonprofit organization working to make women visible and powerful in media. You can learn more about the WMC at womensmediacenter.com.
You're listening to Women's Media Center Live with Robin Morgan.
The phrase secular grace, those can be fighting words. I confess that I am not, repeat not, an avid follower, or indeed any kind of follower at all, of Britney Spears, the teen pop and dance pop star. Concepts of feminism or even basic citizenship seem to have rolled right over her without her taking any notice. She proclaimed of George W. Bush and the Afghan War, "We should trust our president and be faithful to him always." On the sanity index, she seemed a bit of a sick puppy. All that shaving of the head and popping in and out of asylums, sometimes forcibly committed, sometimes voluntarily signed in, all those broken relationships and marriages and annulments and divorces and the way she treated her kids and so forth, not to speak of the fact that her talent appeared to consist of shaking her booty in extremely scanty costumes while singing provocative lyrics, a kind of young, not badly meaning, pretty, not too bright, manipulable, incarnate embodiment of anti-feminism, you might say. She certainly seemed to work hard, yeah, and I did know of her existence, but I just didn't pay much attention. As for the so-called Free Britney movement of her fans who mobilized by the gazillions in opposition to her father's conservatorship of her since 2008, All that simply made me sad that so many young women, almost all white, I noted, got waylaid into her orbit rather than into their own and into women's rights. But then, somehow, news penetrated that her father had forbidden her from reading anything other than Christian religious material. Whoa! How could we have missed that? Not only that, her father, Britney Spears, also refused to allow her to remove an IUD forcibly inserted and to make choices about her reproductive options, thus taking a position that some Roman Catholics leapt to defend as a case of coercive birth control. And he also tried to cure her mental health issues with religion, since he himself is a lifelong alcoholic as well as a born-again Christian. He apparently turned to his born-again God after a spell in rehab, soon after taking control of Britney's life when she was diagnosed as mentally ill herself in 2008. To help run the conservatorship, Britney Spears leaned on the business manager Lou Taylor, who was also a fervent born-again Christian. Britney's divorced mother, Lynn Spears, noted that Jamie and Taylor felt God was leading them to wait, fast, and pray. Born-again Christianity apparently was central to the family's focus during press interviews. Britney herself is now 39, and she finally managed to get her father booted from the controlling position last month after a fraught legal battle that seemed to go on forever. Intellectual and emotional instability seems to run in the family. Jamie's mother, Britney's grandmother, committed suicide when Jamie was 13, and he was involved in a car accident that killed a football teammate when he was 17. By age 22, Jamie had already been arrested on drug and driving while intoxicated charges. His first wife left, and his second wife filed for divorce while requesting a restraining order. It goes on and on. Britney herself, now that she appears to be free of Jamie and his religious control, has been merrily tweeting that she thinks she's going to join the Roman Catholic Church. Quote, "I grew up Baptist," she tweets, "but I studied Kabbalah, so I can go back and forth, and I do believe there is a God." Close quote. Well, that's reassuring. Kabbalah is a complex, esoteric subsystem of philosophy within Orthodox Jewish tradition. But hey, if you're Britney, or Madonna for that matter, why not throw a red thread around your wrist and go for it? None of which is my point here. What did get my attention was the staggering inconsistency in Papa Spears' control of his daughter. On the one hand, for years he apparently forces her to read only Christian texts, while on the other, putting her in front of the world, three-quarter naked, to belt out lyrics like "Baby One More Time" and "Oops, I Did It Again." This kind of cognitive dissonance is epidemic in the Southern Baptist movement, out of which the family comes. Religion became the focus of Britney's career until her 2009 so-called circus tour, but it fell by the wayside when the tour proved hugely profitable and money became the central issue. Well, I wish them all the best, even if I do shudder at her freedom almost as much as I shudder at her having been controlled, which is a rather meandering way of returning to the subject of secular grace. I don't know when religionists will ever cease to be so terrified of women's sexuality that they feel they must crush it utterly until it makes lots of money for them. They have been doing this for literally millennia. Don't they get bored? Does the capacity for multiple orgasms really require such obsessive attention? Colette, the great French writer, gave us a wonderful sentence among many others. Quote, "I do not necessarily respect what I do not understand." Period. Close quote. I've been thinking a lot about that lately, and about the ways I've tried conscientiously and continuously on this podcast to reach out and invite, interview, and include in commentaries observant women of faith, for fear of seeming or being judgmental. But judgment itself should not be thrown out with the bathwater of judgmentalism. I've been clear about my own apostate European Jewish background, and about my affirmation of both the background and of the apostasy. I've been clear, too, about certain types of sexual abuse perpetrated on me by clergy in my childhood. Check out my Me Too blog of October 16th, 2017. Representatives of the Freedom from Religion Foundation have regularly guested on this show, as well as have female rabbis, priests, nuns, imams, and Buddhist monks. I have generally tried to follow the rules of England's Elizabeth Tudor I, who famously said, "I have no desire to gaze into men's souls," in her vain attempt to curb the Protestant zealotry of her counsellor Walsingham in his militant religious persecutions of Catholics. To put it another way, I've made no secret of my own quite contented, God-free spirituality, which takes much joy in the miracle of the Crab Nebula, but cannot stomach the idea of an old guy with a white beard ruling over every detail of our existence from his perch on a golden throne. Nevertheless, somewhere in all of that, Britney Spears' case, muddled as it is by her own unfortunate mental state, got past me. And although the American Civil Liberties Union came to her defense, I did not. Morally and ethically, she had a right to such a defense, certainly from a feminist, whether or not she'd asked for it, and whether or not she is loony or a twit. So I've decided to push harder in defense of my own free-thinking status. After all, etymologically speaking, atheist or atheist merely means someone who's opposed to the notion of a deity, not the reality of a wondrous universe. Agnostic simply breaks down to describe someone who does not claim to know absolutely everything about absolutely everything, which is rather a sensible position. Free thinker, oh, that's a great one. I'll also embrace the verbal identification of irreligiosity and reaffirm my opposition to all systems, religious as well as political, as if there were a difference, that are hierarchical, patriarchal, supremacist, misogynistic, suppressive, and violent. That is, in fact, the history of religion, written in bright blood down through the ages. And although, yes, it has produced millennia of great art, music, and literature, as well as some pretty fabulous rebellious women saints, that does not wash away the blood. It merely proves the irrepressible intrepidity of the artistic spirit. So, I'm deeply grateful to the framers of our Constitution for their basic premise requiring this country, the first in human history, to separate church and state. I'm grateful to science for providing us with some answers, so long, that is, as we continue to seek them. I'm grateful to those evangelical women and men, to those Christians, and to the youth in particular who are leaving their churches in droves, and to the previously observant communities who are doing the same across all religious systems. Perhaps my naming of this status as secular grace will be picked up and used in a self-revelatory manner that can be recognized as welcoming, or certainly, at least not rejecting or exclusionary. So, if you choose, come on in. The water's fine, and it's not baptismal. Those are my fighting words. Add yours on Twitter, and remember to tag us at WMC Live and use the hashtag #FightingWords. that's our show for this week. You can follow me on Twitter, Facebook, and now Instagram at @TheRobinMorgan, and you can check out my blog at robinmorgan.net and find my latest book of poems, Dark Matter, and my brand new novel, Parallax, wherever books are sold. Opinions expressed on this program do not necessarily represent the Women's Media Center. Here's the family for Women's Media Center Live. Executive producer as well as founding and sustaining sponsor, Regina K. Scully. WMC president and co-executive producer of this program, Julie Burton. I'm Robin Morgan, your producer and host. Thank you for being with us. Join us again next time on Women's Media Center Live.